Case 039, John Cage, Part 3. More John Cage. More thinking about music performance or composition, and how thinking constructively about music and our role can take us to new levels. It's not always just about practicing your instrument, or talking to other people about it, or listening to music, or studying scores. Kenny Warner's book did that. See my Effortless Mastery episodes from last year. Barry Green's book did that too. You can see those Inner Game episodes from last year. And talking about these lists, like John Cage's lists or Thelonious Monk's lists, or talking about these books with students, or talking about them on my podcast helps me to dig deeper into these ideas, because they're not superficial ideas. They're profound. And John Cage obviously spent a lot of time thinking about this. And when he wrote these for Mercer Cunningham's school back in the 50s, think about it. That's a lot of decades that have passed, and we're still talking about it. Speaking of lists, and I think I just mentioned Monk's list, I'm going to do an episode on that man's ideas in the future, likely this summer. And he's got some ideas, too, that he wrote out. But in essence, we need to think and plan what we're doing as musicians. Why? It's huge. And there's this sort of archetype or stereotype of musicians that we don't plan, that we don't make lists, that we don't plan things out, that things just occur, and we're, artistically inclined, and we're not going to be organized. But that's really not what I have seen from high performance, high functioning musicians. And it's huge, like I said. That's really the best reason. We can get lost in the morass and rabbit holes that is being a musician. Tunes to learn can sink us. The sheer amount of tunes just as a jazz musician. Technical stuff, etudes, scales, method books, etc. You can get lost in the morass. I get emails constantly checking out a new method book, some new etudes that another bass player has written, some new ways, double bassists coming up with new ways of studying scales. I'm struggling to believe this, but it's probably just a different perspective. But we have to think about what we're doing and have to make plans. And I'm doing that right now. I started up on a 12-week plan for my playing and arranging, and it's mapped out. Will I follow it completely? Likely no. Things will happen, but I'll get back to a plan, however changed and reconfigured, but I still got a plan happening. And thought has to be put into this thing called musicianship. It doesn't just happen. I'm thankful we have men like Kenny Warner and Stephen Nachmanovich and Barry Green and John Cage and Monk that implore us to think and act, and not just, I need to practice more. I know I need to practice more, but I also need to think about what I'm practicing and what I'm trying to do with it. Anyway, I digress again. Back to John Cage. Rule 8. Do not create and analyze at the same time. They're different processes. Make something, finish it, and then look hard at it. That's when you do the analyzing. You write some bass lines for something, finish it, and then play them, and then analyze them. Then analyze them for what you don't think is working. Now, notice that I didn't say mistakes and errors, which would go against Cage's rule number 6. A lot of people, creators as they are known by these days, create something and get halfway through and stop. It doesn't feel right. It doesn't sound good. It doesn't look good. Something's not right about it. There's something lame about it to their eyes and ears. And that's the analyzing part of it that Cage is saying don't do. It's the analyzing part that's creeping in. It's the part of that, what probably Barry Green would say, your self too, creeping in and saying, no, this is no good. We'll stop that. Go back to creating and finishing. You'll feel better. Developing a bass line for your guitarist's new song, keep working. Having something finished, and I mentioned this last time, no matter how you feel about it, is much more edifying and satisfying than having a bunch of unfinished stuff around, because unfinished stuff doesn't really do anything. The saxophonist Michael Brecker came to our jazz arranging class one morning and talked to us about writing, composing. And there was one thing that he said that stuck with me because it made so much sense the moment that it came out of his mouth. And he said to finish all projects. That when you leave them laying around, they take up brain space when they're unfinished. That they're gnawing at you. There's something very unsatisfying about something that's not finished. Finish it. Find a way to put a period at the end of it, and then find a way to use it without forcing it. Now, this all dovetails with rule number 4. Cage says, consider everything an experiment. Just because you start creating something doesn't mean it's going to be great. You're just working it out and seeing what happens, like an experiment. You know, if I put on a track, and I'm just going to use something like an F blues, you know how often I like to use that as an example, and I just start walking lines. I'm just experimenting. I'm warming up into it. You're new to walking over changes like that, you're experimenting. You're new to writing a song, you know, melody, chord changes, lyrics, you're experimenting. You're just playing. You know, Nachmanovich might say something about that, about in this book, Free Play. We're just playing. We want to have that idea. You know, Cage uses the idea of experimenting, the nomenclature of saying we're experimenting. Nachmanovich says we're playing. The genius in Cage's idea is experimenting, and the thought of that when creating takes the pressure off to always create something great. We're not going to always create something great. Sometimes it's not going to work. And we have to realize that. Sometimes it's not going to work right now. And then we finish it and put it away. And then later on we realize, wait a second, it works. I've done this 100 times, if not more. We need to take the pressure off and enjoy the process. It's fun being a musician. It's fun creating bass lines. It's fun creating arrangements. It's fun listening to my students play. It's fun creating new ways to teach bass lines and melodies to my students. But let's knock off the pressure. It does no good. And I know it looks dramatic to be surrounded by pressure and start sweating and responding, but that's not how stuff is created. You'll be a happier person, which leads to rule number 9. Cage, be happy whenever you can manage it. Enjoy yourself. It's lighter than you think. I'm the worst violator of this rule. It's lighter than you think. High pressure doesn't belong in music in every day of the everyday musician's life. We've got to get away from this ultra serious approach to practicing and composing music because it is lighter than you think. That seriousness, that mock urgency, that it's taking some of the creativity away. We cannot create and think freely if we're putting pressure on ourselves and being super serious all the time. The times that I come up with ideas for bass lines or ways of teaching stuff to my students or my classes, or, you know, even stuff like what tune am I going to bring to combo classes next, that stuff comes about when I'm not being ultra serious. It comes about when I'm not even at my instrument or even my studio. I'm just not thinking about it. Now think about that. I'll be in a restaurant talking to my wife or friends, and I'll think about a tune that would work in combo. It comes about because I'm not being ultra serious. Same thing for an idea for an arrangement or a bass line. It is lighter than you think. You can email me at phil@basscase.co. I'll talk to you soon.